And welcome to Sugar Talk with Dr. K.G. Lucas of Lucas Research. And good morning, Doctor. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great.
How was your diabetes school?
Diabetes school went great.
Mm-hmm.
The good weather, and everybody enjoyed the aquarium afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
We had a good crowd.
Now, that's the last one for this year. Is that right?
Yes. We haven't gotten scheduled for next year, but we will have 3 next year, and one will probably be at the aquarium like next fall.
Mm-hmm.
But then we'll have one in New Bern and one in Swansboro like we did this year.
Yeah, so that was a good thing. You did that. You went out on the road this time and this past year, and it all seemed to reach a broader number of people.
Well, I mean, it's more convenient for people to go there. You don't want to have to get up early Saturday morning and drive an hour to diabetes school.
Yeah. Okay, so what are we talking about today?
So we're talking about some questions that came up at diabetes school that were sort of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One was, I think there's still a lot of confusion with what type 1 and type 2 diabetes is.
Sure.
I think there was always confusion, but when there was labeled juvenile onset diabetes, you thought, well, juvenile onset, I don't have that.
Right.
But then they found out that type 1 diabetes can be acquired at any age.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started calling them insulin-dependent diabetes for type 1.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not true because type 2s can be on insulin also. And then people were saying, well, can type 2s turn into type 1s? You're
Mm-hmm.
like, no.
Do you graduate from one to the other?
That's right. Or if you do something different with your diet, can you change your type of... So the types
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to make a definition that includes everybody that has that type.
Mm-hmm.
So type 1 can be any age, not just below age 20. It's easier to diagnose, of course, if you're younger. The younger you are and the more severe the onset, like one day you're fine, the next day you're in the hospital with diabetes. A lot of that is type 1, and that usually occurs at younger ages. But type 1 can occur at any age. The trouble with diagnosing it sometimes is that you're older, you still make a little insulin. Mm-hmm. So the little bit of insulin makes you look like a type 2. So type 1 definition is that you don't make any insulin, that you have autoimmune destruction of your cells that make insulin. So your body attacks the cells that make insulin and kills them. So you don't have any cells that make insulin. Mm-hmm. However, if you're older and your immune system is more mature and better fighting off, problems, fighting off these autoimmune things. If you're better at that, or fighting off viruses, the viruses set off the immune system. So if your immune system is better as you get older, you've been exposed to more things. The viruses don't generate as much of an autoimmune response. Then you can still make some insulin, and so they've been calling that 1.5. Type 1.5.
That's not confusing. No,
let's just leave that out.
It makes it more confusing. So, can someone who is diagnosed as type 1 diabetic when they're older than, 20?
Yes.
So in their 30s or 40s, they're diagnosed with type 1. Is it likely that they had it all along? They just weren't diagnosed?
Because you can measure antibodies. You can measure the antibodies against islet cells, and they have them. Mm-hmm. I mean, once you start measuring those, maybe you shouldn't be measuring them. Maybe ignorance is bliss. But if you measure those antibodies, they have them, and over time, their pancreas will gradually not make insulin. So you have to rethink what you're doing. You have to put them on medicines that maybe help the pancreas out, preserve the pancreatic function, and not put them, and you can put them on insulin early too, and that's one way of doing it. You don't want them to gain a bunch of weight. A lot of these people are pretty normal weight, type 1. So if you've got somebody that's 30 or 40, they're pretty normal weight, they have no family history of diabetes, and they get diabetes, you wonder about those people. So I usually measure how much insulin they are making and if they have antibodies. Now some people don't have antibodies, but that's what you're trying to figure out. The way you can figure it out is by measuring how many antibodies they have. It doesn't change necessarily what you're doing because you're still trying to get the sugar normal, as normal as possible, no matter what it takes. But at least you don't have this severe trial and error method.
So type 2 diabetics do not have those antibodies present?
They do not. Now, there are people with 1 and 2, but let's try to not keep too confusing. But type 2 diabetes is a genetic disorder that you're insulin resistant. So you inherit it from somebody. Now, you may not know anybody in your family that had it. Maybe they had heart disease early, had a heart attack, they didn't live long enough to get diabetes, because diabetes takes a while to develop. So it may take a long time to actually get diabetes. But what you have first is you have insulin resistance, and that makes you gain weight in the middle, and that makes you hungry, that makes you shaky if you don't eat, and that type of thing. It creates a lot of other problems like high cholesterol and high blood pressure, heart disease, are all related to insulin resistance, and some cancers actually are related to insulin resistance. So that's what you've inherited, and that is inherited. Type 1 diabetes is very rarely inherited, and there's a few genetic disorders that cause type 1, they make no insulin, but most of the time it is not inherited. So if you have somebody with type 1 diabetes in your family, you're very unlikely to get type 1. Unless a bunch of people in every generation have type 1, then that's a genetic thing. But most people that get type 1 do not have anybody else in their family. They don't know where they got it. It wasn't their fault. It's pretty much out of the blue.
Okay, so it seems like there are some dividing lines there, even though some get crossed on occasion.
Yeah, I mean, there's a gray area, of course, but type 2 diabetes is a long history of insulin resistance. 90% have increased weight in the middle of their body, belly fat. So you can sort of go by that. Some people like Orientals who never really get really fat, except sumo wrestlers, I guess. They also have a belly. So if you start, their belly measurements are going to be different as far as their definition, but so different cultures have different criteria for type 2 or for insulin resistance. But overall, if you're overweight in the middle, you're probably insulin resistant.
Okay, so that brings up the next question. If you lose weight, can you get rid of diabetes?
You can get, if you have type 2 diabetes, and you're real overweight in the middle, and you catch it really, really early, like before your pancreas is dead.
That's helpful. Yeah.
Before you've worn out your pancreas, because you are wearing out your pancreas, and that's why you got diabetes. Because the insulin resistance makes the pancreas make a lot of insulin, like 5 times more than normal sometimes. I mean, sometimes huge amounts of insulin are made just to try to keep the sugar normal. The body really wants the sugar to be normal. So over your whole life, you've been making so much insulin. If your heart, beat 5 times more than normal, it wouldn't last very long. And that's the way the pancreas is. It wears out over time. So if you catch it early, we try to catch it even before people get diabetes. And I think there is a tendency to do that, to try to treat them early. So if your pancreas is working and all your problem is that you've gained a bunch of weight in the middle, you can lose it, and that will help.
All right, we'll have more to come in just a moment with Dr. K.G. Lucas of Lucas Research, online at lucasresearch.org, and you can also call their office to find out more information about studies that we're going to talk about next, too, by the way. 222-5700, that's 252-222-5700, and more in just a moment. K.G. Lucas of Lucas Research, and Doctor, in your diabetes school of people, I know you talk about your research programs, so people ask you about those too?
Yes, we talk about why you should go into a research program, and since diabetes is a genetic disease, you're helping develop drugs that will help your children and grandchildren, and so that's a good way of looking at it. You also get good attention to your diabetes. We have type 1 and type 2 studies, people on metformin only, or people on metformin and one other medicine, people with kidney disease from diabetes or heart disease. We even have 2 pediatric studies that are starting like this month for type 1, pediatrics, and type 2.
Okay, the pediatric studies, I imagine, are a little bit trickier because you got to coordinate both parents and child.
Yes.
Right? So,
Yes, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Have you done any of those?
We've never done any pediatric studies. I think it's because the FDA now is really emphasizing getting drugs approved for under 18, because I think most people don't understand that usually you have to be 18 or over to be in studies. And so nothing ever gets approved for the pediatric age group. Hardly anything is approved for that. Even some insulins are not approved for pediatric age group. So they're trying to do the pediatric age group and get it approved for that type. I mean, metformin's only approved down to age 10. And so that's about one of the only type 2 drugs that are approved for children.
But even type 1, because type 1 has long affected many kids.
Oh, yeah. But it may not be approved for children, that type of insulin. Just like a lot of insulins are not approved in pregnancy. But we still use them because, so what? A doctor has a way of doing that because they've been trained to use the medications even if they're not approved. But the insurance plan may not pay for it. You know, if they say, well, that's not approved, they can use that as an excuse for not paying.
Even though gestational diabetes is obviously a big issue.
Yes.
So again, but the basic requirements for being in a study.
Usually, well, the pediatrics less than 18. It's age 6 to 18, and then the adults are over 18. There's an upper range on some studies. They're getting less and less common to have an upper range, so that's good.
Okay.
And there's different rules for each study.
You can go online at lucasresearch.org and find out more. Also, give them a call at 252-222-5700 for Lucas Research, who brings you Sugar Talk every Monday morning.